what are your thoughts about the 4-day work week? Are there any legal implications for doing so?
Oh, and I'll remind you, Rob, that you're in the U.S., which has very different employment laws, so none of my comments apply to your situation. But it's a great question. We're seeing a lot more different employment relationships. The days of 9 to 5, as you said, Rob, are long gone for most of us. But we see a lot more part-time work. We see a lot more contract work. We see a lot more short-term work. And the reality is, even though the standard work week is still sort of a 35 or 37 and a half, or maybe a 40-hour work week, we see a lot of other people who have part-time arrangements. And of course, there's nothing legally wrong with that. There's nothing legally wrong with a 4-day work week. What I see, though, and what we often see, are the issues that arise because the parties aren't really on the same page. So what we see is someone who is, a company trying to cram 5 days worth of work into 4 days. And the employee thought they were really signing up for a true 80% of the job type of deal. So what we often see is that it becomes, 4 15-hour days. Or recently I saw a situation where someone was hired in a sort of managerial type of role. They had young children at home, and they were very specifically looking for something that would be no more than 3 days a week. And they thought they found it. They had an agreement which said you'll be working in the office 3 days a week. I think it was 9 to 5, maybe 9 to 6, something like that. But her assumption was that the other 2 days a week, plus the weekend, were her time. The employer's assumption was that she would not be in the office on those 2 days, but she'd be available by phone, by email, by text, etc. And it very quickly came to a head, and the parties realized, and I should mention, neither party had legal advice when they entered into this agreement, so they really hadn't papered it properly. And that was the issue we had, is we had to sort of piece together what the agreement was and see if we could put it in writing, and in that case, we were never really able to. But the point is, for the most part, a 4-day work week, 3-day work week, there's no legal issues there. The only challenge might be if you try to cram too much into those days, because certain provinces in Canada have not only limits on the number of hours in a week, but limits on the number of hours in a day. So you need to make sure you're not going over the number of hours in a day. Of course, this only applies to certain types of employees. It doesn't apply to managers, supervisors, professionals. Lawyers, for example, are not covered. You can make us work as many hours as you want. But for the most part, that's the only real thing that's going to come up is, are you having the person work too many hours in a day? The other wrinkle that occasionally arises, and we've had to advise a few clients on this, is if you have someone who works typically, let's say, 3 days a week, Wednesday through Friday, and most, as you know, most statutory holidays in Canada are on Mondays. So what happens to a statutory holiday if the person never works on a Monday? And there are provisions for that in every piece of legislation. So you got to be mindful of things like that, of the hours of work. Other than that, there's no legal issues that arise from the 4-day or any variation on the work week. It's really, the key thing to me is making sure that whatever the agreement is, both parties understand it and it's documented clearly, because often issues arise down the road, and if it's not clear, you're going to end up in some sort of dispute.